Mr. Chairman.
I call
Mr. Chairman.
Simon O'Connor.
Point of order,
Mr.
Mr. Chairman. Mr.
Point of
Chairman.
order.
First call, Mr. Chairman.
Point of order.
Point of order, David.
Point of order, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wish to seek leave to table this document, which is from the OIA material. It's Lynn's diagram dated the 15th of May 2015, and it demonstrates the period of time that a paper-based system...
Tell me what it is and where it's come from.
It's come from Lynn's in an Official Information Act.
Leave is put for that purpose. Is there any objection?
Sorry? No, it's from an OIA, and it shows the paper-based collection.
The document's been described. Leave is sought. Is there any objection? There appears not to be. I called Simon O'Connor.
I move that the question be now put.
I call the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise to take a first call in this committee stage of the Taxation, Land Information and Offshore Persons Information Bill, and I trust it will be the first of a number that will assist the House in finding a way through this. There are two areas that I wish to address. The first is the rationale for the bill. The second is the implementation issues which the bill throws up. To bring the public into the rationale issue, can I pose a rhetorical question? What do the housing shortage, the refugee issue, and capital gains tax and the overseas buyers register all have in common? And the answer, sir, is that they are all examples of a particular mojo or operating method by this government. In the face of overwhelming public pressure and an overwhelming policy case for change, the government concedes a very small, usually ineffective amount so that it's got something that it can say to the public. Never mind whether it'll work or not, never mind whether it'll solve the problem at issue, never mind whether it's actually practically able to be implemented, it's good enough for the press release and the PR campaign. That's why we have special housing areas with no houses. That's why we've got a temporary and very reluctant increase to the refugee quota. That's why we don't have a capital gains tax that will work, but we may have a partial bright line test to accompany this. That's why we don't have a valid, operable offshore buyer register, but why this bill brings in a partial system for registering offshore persons. And to explain the difference, sir, let me drop down to the implementation issues. My colleague David Clark and my colleague Stuart Nash have both quite rightly lampooned the idea that in the 21st century we're having a paper-based set of records of anything, let alone anything as important, sophisticated and high value as overseas property transactions. If that were known in the international press, I dare say New Zealand would be an utter laughingstock. So the second implementation issue is that, as the Honourable Peter Dunn well knows, and he didn't have silver grey hair before this, the IRD computer system is not easy. He's there. I used to do the job that he's doing as Minister of Revenue, and it is a worry. You can't make a change to one part of the IRD computer system without the rest of it threatening to fall over. And time is a guinea. And the answer seems to be a $1 billion computer upgrade. Let me say that again, a $1 billion computer upgrade with a contingency margin of $500 million. It's hard to believe that anybody could put through Cabinet a project with a contingency margin, that's an overrun of $500 million. Good luck, Peter Dunn. I hope it works. If it doesn't, well, we'll be sending you flowers in whichever retirement place you elect, because it probably won't be in the House. But look, this makes it worse. We're asking for bespoke changes to the IRD's operating system eventually, because at the moment it's just pencil and paper, for a system that will not and cannot work. Why can it not work, even if we could get the IRD system to change? Well, that's because it doesn't actually separate out what the register should be doing, which is identifying offshore speculative pressure and separating that out from the legitimate purchases of New Zealand citizens and permanent residents. If Joe Bloggs in my electorate or yours, Mr. Chairman, moves overseas and decides to sell or buy a property in New Zealand, good luck to them. They are as much New Zealanders as you or I living in New Zealand. And actually, 1 out of 5 Kiwis doesn't live in New Zealand. We have the second highest diaspora in the OECD after Ireland. 1 in 5 of us lives overseas. We should be able to trade property in our home country. Not an issue. Likewise, we should treat permanent residents equally. So that leaves us with non-residents. And the whole issue here is that most other countries, including Australia, have a very simple rule. If you don't live in New Zealand and you don't plan to, you shouldn't be able to speculate on property unless you actually build a house, because New Zealand houses should be for Kiwis to live in. And this register ought to be an opportunity to make even, Mr. Chairman.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, sir. Make a small but incremental gain into that issue. Because if we were validly identifying speculators who had no intention of living here and separating that out from Kiwis who may well come back and in any case have a right to trade property, then we would have a so what that was worth the paper-based angst. But not only is this probably not implementable according to IRD and LINS, but even if you could, there's very little point, because in its current construction, it won't actually do anything useful. So why are we here? And the answer is, I'm afraid, buried in the first part of... No, we're not going that deep tonight, but I know how it feels being a government backbencher. When you ask why are we here, you're saying, why am I here? Because I don't get to do anything. At least in opposition, we get to get stuck into issues. This bill is here, Mr. Chairman. You know, I say this to the whip opposite. He's a decent guy, I'll be honest with him. You know, we're getting good at this, but we don't want to stay here forever, so we'll be happy to trade you in 2 years' time, and we're pretty sure that's what's going to happen. So, Mr. Chairman, to round off, the reason this bill is here is because it is part of a PR gimmick by the government. Faced with overwhelming public pressure to do something about the insane Auckland property market and the increasing influence of foreign speculation, it has bowed to pressure and it has finally started to build some kind of register, albeit partial, albeit ill-defined, albeit difficult to implement. It is, in fact, contradicting the earlier words of leaders of the government. Nick Smith, the Minister of Housing, said a register would be a distraction that would cost mega millions without doing a thing to tackle house price inflation. I hope, sir, that he was wrong. Not for the sake of the government, it would hurry them to opposition, but for the sake of New Zealand, I hope, sir, that he was wrong.
I call Brett Hudson.